Nowadays, it's not uncommon to hear some black people saying that we're suffering from a generational curse, a biblical curse, and or a slave syndrome. Those are the three common premises that millions of African Americans routinely assign to our plight and condition. However, those black people who believe that those premises are true are thinking precisely as what oppressive forces have manipulated us to think. If you think that we are inflicted by some type of curse, then your intelligence level is exactly where white oppressive forces wants it to be. According to the U.S. Department of Defense, DoD, Doctrine of Psychological Warfare, it states that the most effective way to subdue and control a large targeted population without actually physically fighting them is by bombarding them with fraudulent propaganda that manipulates them to believe that their core problem is an internalized one. When people have been made to believe that their core problem lies within themselves, this demoralizes them, divides them, makes them self-doubting, and it shifts their collective aggressions away from their enemies and redirected towards themselves. And it makes them more compliant with their oppressor's dominance over their lives. Many will even prefer it. Furthermore, it also shifts their collective aggressions away from their oppressors and it redirects it towards themselves. And they can then be ruled over forever. This is precisely what's happening to black people when we've been misled to believe that our core problem is an internalized one. It's absolutely not. That's precisely, however, what white oppressive forces wants us believing, because it gives them greater psychological power and control over us. Critically think, if there's something inherently wrong with us, then how then were we African Americans able to implement the most successful unified protests in U.S. history? The degree of unity and organization demonstrated among African Americans during the 1960s was extraordinary, and it still remains unrivaled by any other group in U.S. history. This unprecedented unified protest came not from Asian Americans, not from Latin Americans, not from Native Americans. This unprecedented response that stood up against white oppression came from the African Americans, the group that came to the U.S. as enslaved people. The group that was placed at the lowest point within the society stood up the tallest and the strongest against the system of white supremacy. This fact contradicts the premise that there is something inherently wrong with African Americans. It demonstrates the exact opposite. Our oppressors want us believing that there's something inherently wrong within ourselves because it aids them in maintaining their social dominance and control over us. Some black people have been so heavily demoralized by the white society's fraudulent negative depiction of us that many literally find it easier to continue believing the fraudulent worst about ourselves than to accept the fact that we're being lied to because it gives our oppressors greatest power over us. Sometimes it's easier to fool people than it is to show them that they've been fooled. Therefore, I will present more facts demonstrating that we are not suffering from some generational curse. The negative premise about us is untrue. Case in point, if something is inherently wrong with us, how then is it that after slavery was abolished in the U.S. in 1865, and in spite of receiving no reparation and being constantly plagued by white subjugation tactics, however, from 1870 to 1940, African Americans submitted 726 invention patent applications to the U.S. Patent Office. Not only is this extraordinary achievement under those noted circumstances and so closely following slavery, but the numbers of patents submitted by African Americans more than doubled those submitted by Caucasians during the same time frame, and in spite of the fact that African Americans then made up less than 3% of the U.S. population. This is extraordinary. And this scenario of African Americans outpacing Caucasians in the inventions of revolutionizing invention has never stopped. It's merely being concealed from the general public through the white society's monopoly over information and media images. They control what information is fed into our society and they keep it distorted. All you have to do is keep repeating lies through media ads, falsely scripted movies, miseducation, and before long, the majority of the public will then accept those lies rather than what's actually true. Those lies become the stories that the public believes and then function based upon. This is what the white society has done. This is precisely what they've done to hide the contributions made by black people. Case, point, and proof. Within our white governed schools, we are miseducated to believe that Thomas Edison is the inventor that is responsible for lighting up the entire world. But the true reality is that after Thomas Edison patented his light bulbs, no companies purchased it nor mass produced it. This is because it was deemed not efficient enough. It lit very dimly and only lasted a few minutes. The inventor whose light bulb was purchased by the U.S. Electric Company in 1881, then mass produced, and that was dispatched around the world to oversee its installation, was actually in fact invented by an African American named Lewis Latimer. Therefore, in reality, it was actually a black man that lit up the entire world. But they're not teaching that. Lewis Latimer also wrote the blueprints plans for Graham Bell's telephone. The white society has also miseducated us to believe that the Wright brothers are responsible for building the first aircraft in 1909. However, the hidden fact is that before the Wright brothers flew their aircraft in 1909, a black man named Charles F. Page had already invented, patterned, and flown an aircraft 3 years earlier in the year 1906. The white society has also taught us that Henry Ford invented the first automobile. However, it was actually an African American inventor named Charles Richard Patterson that built the first automobile. The C.R. Patterson and Sons Company started out as a carriage building firm in 1873. He and his sons converted the company from a carriage business to an automobile manufacturer. They started making automobiles before Henry Ford and sold the first one for $850. It had a 4-cylinder Continental engine. C.R. Patterson's automobiles was said to have been much more sophisticated. However, C.R. Patterson and Sons were forced out of business by Henry Ford in the year 1939. It's by deliberate design that most people are unaware of these historical facts. These facts have been deliberately omitted from our whitewash history books. They've been expunged from public record and history. Through the white society's monopoly over information that are fed into our society, they've whitewashed history. They've falsely marginalized the past existence of black people. They've manipulated millions of people to believe that most inventions are coming from the minds of Caucasians and to perceive black people as being the leeches of society that haven't invented much throughout history. And many people walk around believing this. But the truth is the exact opposite from what they've manipulated millions to believe. The hidden reality is that, in spite of cultural traumas wrought by slavery and the continued injustices of white racism, most inventions that have revolutionized the world were in fact either invented by black people or were directly inspired by early inventions made by black people. Without black people, there would exist no motors, no automobiles, no airplanes, no helicopters. Without black people, we would not have skyscrapers. We only have skyscrapers because black people invented the elevator, the fire extinguisher, the escape ladders, air conditioning, and heating, which are essential in order for people to live and work within skyscrapers. Without black people, there would exist no internet, no cell phones. We wouldn't have cameras and microphones on our cell phones if it was not for Black people. We wouldn't have the accurate weather forecasting system. We wouldn't have the cataract laser removal scope. There would be no emails, no GPS, no hearing aids, no touch-tone phones, no caller ID, no home surveillance security system, no home game cartridges, no steam engines, no traffic lights. Without Black people, there would exist no refrigerators, no refrigerated trucks, therefore no ice cream trucks, no blood banks, no dry cleaning, no lawnmowers, no doorknobs, no 3D movies, no fiber optics, no nanotechnology, no female sanitary pads, no bathroom tissue holders, no pencil sharpeners, etc., etc. The technological advancement made by Black people throughout history have been extraordinary. The life of virtually every person on this planet have benefited, have been enriched by inventions made by Black people. But this is not the narrative that our society functions based upon. When a well-packaged web of lies have been sold gradually to the masses over generations, the truth will seem absolutely ridiculous, and a speaker will appear to be a raving lunatic. Nonetheless, the truth is still the truth, even though people have been brainwashed to believe the lies. Through their monopoly over information that fed into our society, the white ruling class have falsely marginalized the past existence of Black people. The white society sits upon a throne of white exalting and Black marginalizing lies. It's actually the genius minds of Black people that moves the world forward. However, in order for Black inventors to get their inventions mass produced, they have to go before these white companies. These white companies acquires the right to these inventions and then places white faces in front of the technology. This scenario allows the white society to continue exploiting the genius minds of Black people while maintaining the perception that most inventions are coming from the minds of Caucasians. This is the hidden reality. Your perception of reality is an elaborate white deception. It has been distorted by false narratives and distorted media images that have been repetitively fed into your minds by the white society. The white ruling class have always known of the immense power that comes from being able to control the narratives and media images that are fed into a society. And they've always exploited this scenario in ways that serves and benefits the system of white supremacy. The reason why white oppressive forces wants Black people believing that we're either inflicted by something, that is something inherently wrong with us, such as a generational curse, a biblical curse, or a slave syndrome, because doing so creates what is called a self-fulfilling prophecy that mentally enslaves us. A self-fulfilling prophecy is when people's behaviors aligns with the narrative that they've been made to believe about themselves. It's a process through which an originally false narrative leads to its own confirmation. In a self-fulfilling prophecy, people start acting and functioning based upon the false narratives about themselves, thus, in a sense, making it true. Wikipedia describes a self-fulfilling prophecy as a prediction that comes true, at least in part, as a result of people believing that is true. Their expectations align with the false belief. This is because people's beliefs influence their behaviors and their actions. So if we're believing that there's something inherently wrong with us, we start functioning based upon it. We start believing that we are subservient towards whites. We start becoming more compliant with their dominance over our lives. This is why we go to the hospital and say, I want a white doctor. We are functioning based upon those false narratives. So when you walk around telling people, oh, we're suffering from a generational curse, the reality is Black people don't know anything negative about us that doesn't come from white sources. So it's those white sources who feed us information that misleads us to believe those negative things about ourselves. To free our minds, we must stop functioning based upon the white society's lies about us. When you look at our true narrative, you see we are a powerful people. And you'll understand why they create this perception management system to keep us believing the frauds and worse about ourselves. It's like overcoming a superior people by creating a psychological remedy. You manipulate those powerful people to believe that they are the lesser people, and it allows them to maintain their dominance over us. It's time to learn our true reality. One love and peace.